Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blues Talk, where again, John, Dave, and myself are going to look back over Leinster's victory against Ulster in the semi-final, look forward to the B&I Cup, and also discuss a few other rugby matters. So, boys, into our fifth consecutive Pro 12 final.
Yeah, it's getting a bit boring. They say it's very passé getting into finals. No, it's great. I mean, it has been a season that's kind of been a transition year. Things haven't always been as nice as we would have liked them, but you know, at the end of the year, we're into the final again. Again, a game that, first of all, the atmosphere at the game was superb. It was just superb. It was probably one of the best we've had in a year or two since last year's final. Indeed, yeah. Ulster fans always do add to it. And the second thing is, like, although the game when you were there mightn't have seemed, you know, it was a very entertaining game. It was a very absorbing game, but the quality mightn't have seemed so good. When you watched it again, I watched it back. And it looked a lot better on the second time than it did the first time around. I mean, there was stuff that I was really unhappy about the first time around that now I'm not unhappy about at all. I mean, our defense was McQuilkin-esque in its surety. You know, there were things. Maybe our kicking was a bit loose and stuff like that, but you know, I thought overall it was kind of a really good, to a certain extent, a classic Leinster rope-a-dope performance. We sucked the opposition in. How many times have we seen this? Suck the opposition in, and then in a 15-minute spread, just beat them.
Ba-doom, yeah.
And then that's it, game over.
Yeah, I think I remember saying last week that the more of their players that they got back from injury, in some ways the harder it would be for them. Okay, they couldn't have done without the likes of Best and Pienaar, but it did mean that getting them on the pitch meant that they were having unfit players on the pitch who would not last the 80. Now, Best did, fair play to him. He's a machine of a thing. He's got Wolverine regeneration, Brian O'Driscoll genes in there that help him recover. Pienaar, though, wasn't sharp. It was Redden, in fairness. He was in a similar situation. And what kind of won it for us was a bit of that and a bit of the fact that we had a serious bench to bring on. You know, yeah. Everybody's flagged it well ahead of time. Like, we'd 4 international props. They had 0.
Yeah, and I think that was the big difference. And we had a scrum. And it's the old adage, you know, that the pack wins you games. And when we were under so much pressure for long periods of the game, to be able to come out and have a scrum and mull them off the ball and get a penalty and keep in touch.
Scrummaging always reminds me of, what is it you golfists say, drive for show, putt for dough. Scrummaging is the putting for dough. It's the stuff that it's the stuff that gets you over the line, you know. And that's it, like you say. The excess of quality we had in the scrum, the excess of quality we had on the bench, the way we used it. I mean, we were in a very unfortunate situation in terms of injuries and stuff. But we used the bench quite well, even in terms of just not panicking. And at one stage, and you could see how well the team is drilled. At one stage, we had a ruck, and there was a backs move, and it was the kind of move where normally you'd see Dave Carney coming in, cutting a line across to down the side of the ruck. And what line does Luke McGrath take? The exact same line as David Carney would have taken. Yeah, so it just shows how well that team is drilled in terms of it doesn't matter if they're playing their own position or somebody else's position. They actually know what to do the right time every time.
Yeah, Luke McGrath looked a little bit lost at times on the wing.
I don't blame him though.
No.
Absolutely, I don't blame him. Like, he's a scrum half. I don't know if he's ever played on the wing. Maybe he did in school or something,
But I thought our 3 tactical changes, O'Brien, Cullen and Madigan, made such an overwhelming difference to the team. They upped the pace, like with Leo's nous and underhanded skills.
Madigan came out for O'Driscoll, in fairness. But
I think Leo's substitution kind of helped us shut out the game.
Yeah, totally.
I think the other, if you like, the 4, if you like, well, certainly the 2 voluntary ones in the front row made a big difference as well, because they just kept the pressure on.
Yeah.
And where we were standing in the terrace, we could see Tom Court watching the game from the tunnel, and he looked forlorn. And how much would have Ulster given to have his quality on the pitch, you know? It's like I said before, it's like we did against Claremont, it's like we've done it against a lot of teams. We let them punch themselves out on our arms and then just kept swinging.
Yeah. Well, we I think maybe a factor of the amount of tackling we had to do as well was the injuries, and Dave Carney out for a long time now, probably
4 to 5
months.
months.
The start of the season. Draco and Fergus McFadden look like they're probably be okay, but you know, again, the substitutes like we kind of shot our bolt on the substitutes by the time it came along to putting Luke, when Dave Carney, like we lost both our wingers and our 13, so so
we 2 scrum halves, 2 out halves,
2 out halves, 2 full backs and a centre in the back line, which is pretty crazy.
But in a well-drilled team like Leinster are, every player knows.
Well, defensively we were
every player knows everyone else's job anyway. So that's what I was saying about Luke McGrath. He was able to cut that line because he, maybe as a scrum half, he knows that that's the move that's coming. But as a Leinster back, he knows all the moves that are available to him as a Leinster back, and it's the same defensively. They each know everybody else's job down pat. So it's if you like, a kind of a Dutch version or a rugby version of Dutch total football. It was the use of the bench was key, but there was a whole load of kind of factors that were key. Ulster made some, like you said, some of the guys that came back weren't great. Some of the tactical selections they made, we said it before about Robbie Dyack. He is the Magnolia of rugby players.
He wasn't fit either. He was one of the ones coming back with no game time.
He never offends, but he doesn't exactly impose himself. I mean, you could watch a match with Robbie Dyack playing and think, Jesus, who was playing number 6?
Well, I would say more that, like, he's had some very good games during the year, but they haven't been big knockout games. No. He maybe himself and Cave kind of go into their shell a little bit when the real pressure is on.
It was interesting to hear Mark Anscombe say that actually in his post-match. Like he said that the team just, they're good players and they can get into these situations of being in knockout games, but when it comes to the crunch, they don't have the composure to get over the line.
Well, you had a few, I would have said, mistakes from Mark Anscombe too in terms of selection. I don't know about this Darren Cave at 12 and Payne at 13.
They're very unhappy about it up in Ulster.
I would have played, like, what a stupid time of the season to move Payne to 13. Like, you'd Gilroy at full back, who is not Gervin Dempsey in terms of positional play at full back, shall we say. I mean, he looked okay. He did a few nice little twisty, escape moves and steps and stuff like that. He's a good player, but he's not an amazing fullback. And for such a crunch match, when you had Payne there and you had Luke Marshall on the bench, if you had Gilroy on the bench and Luke Marshall starting with Cave, it might have been a different. All the players in their accustomed position. Having said that, their back line did look.
Just to further go with that, it also put your wingers on their back foot. Because they're in the back of their mind, they're always thinking, I have to go back. I might have to go back and cover for him. So they're not always forward thinking. A lot of their thought process is about covering back. Sorry, carry on.
Well, you would have said they had the better back line on the day. To be fair, they had a lot more possession and they looked a lot more. They seemed to try a lot more backs moves and they never got into the red zone with them. We seemed to hold them out. Mixture of our defence and them maybe panicking and I think. Above all, Pienaar not being sharp. Like, he made a few bad decisions, and both himself and Goppert missed penalties to touch, trying to take too much out of the ball. He just didn't have that little X factor that he normally. The way he normally looks so relaxed, and he appears out of nowhere. And he's a big guy. He's about 6'2" or 6'1". He just appears out of nowhere, like in an almost Owen Redden-like manner, and he looks unhurried. He didn't have that. He didn't have that sharpness.
The other side of that, or another perhaps element to that, might necessarily be to do with sharpness and stuff. I mean, at this stage, there's no question who Ulster's bogey team are. I mean, we have done worse to them than Ospreys ever did to us, kind of thing.
Yeah, 4 in a row.
So there is an element to that. You see it with some of the players that they do err on the side of trying too hard against us, and that leads to mistakes because they put themselves under pressure.
But they got no luck. I mean, when Pienaar blocked down, the ball could have bounced up for him. It didn't. Shortly after, McFadden could have got tackled under the sticks. It would have been a scrum 5 to them, but he didn't. He got out of the dead ball area. And
what was he doing there?
Well, at least he
I think
just touched down.
I don't think he was confident that he didn't carry it over himself.
Possibly,
yeah. So I think he was going to try and get out.
Confidence in his ability to get out.
But he's going to try and get out or let himself be tackled. Either way, he was going to get done, kind of thing. So he only had one choice there. I think they were certainly very, very fortunate with that blockdown. Then the other side of that is they kind of got the look from the blockdown 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So these things have a way of bouncing them themselves out across the season. I'd say Ulster would have preferred it was the other way around, but that's the way it works sometimes. And we were in a position where a lot of guys that maybe haven't played all that well in recent weeks actually did up their game a bit. I thought Jimmy Gopperth had one of his best games in a long time. Some of his
a bit of a mixed game.
Some of his line kicking wasn't great, but I mean he made a couple of really good line breaks.
He did that all right. Yeah.
The support should have been with him on them. His pass for Madigan's try was an absolute doozy of a little delayed pass, the real kind of special New Zealand pass.
On the other side of it, though,
and he made his tackles.
Yeah, he did. But on the other side of it, there was a lot of stuff like runners getting isolated. Even Devin Toner made a bloody run. What backs can't keep up with Devin Toner? There was a lot of like vintage Leinster. We're all harping back to how we would have played 2 years ago, but there would have always been somebody on the shoulder. There would have been, we just don't have that cohesion that we used to have before. And there's so many reasons for it. We're not going to list them all again, but
But there's a few times that we did make the breaks, and it seemed that everyone ran to the ball rather than spread out and give options either side. And it's like we can talk about how good, and because it was a semi-final, these games are so tight and nip and tuck, and you're playing your local rival and all the rest of it. But there was a lot of inaccuracy still, even though
on both sides.
But even when we did make breaks, we weren't clinical enough at the breakdown. We either knocked it on or we got pinged for going off our feet. And put it this way: if we play like that against Glasgow, which are the form team in the league, I don't think
might not get as lucky.
Exactly.
No, but what we've seen is, I mean, we'll obviously have to improve against Glasgow, but then we improved against Ulster from the previous week.
Yeah.
So there's this team has it in it. I mean, winning trophies is in this team's DNA, and if they know what they need to do to win.
Well, I think the thing with that experience, a lot of it is they know how much pain they have to be in to get over the line, and they know how much they have to put themselves on the line to win something else. They know the difference between stopping a guy 5 meters out or 2 meters out or whatever, and him getting across the line in a league match. Or in a team that doesn't have that experience, they might just not have that extra little tiny bit that cripples the guy and puts him in touch, or and I think that it's more about how much pain you have to inflict upon yourself for the team, and that's what one of the big factors on the experience.
When you win, you realise how much joy it brings, and because of that, it's like a drug. You're prepared to take that little bit more pain in order to get that feeling again. And that's why teams that win really good teams, when they start winning, they keep winning because they're prepared to take that extra bit of pain to get that extra bit of exaltation.
Yeah, that's what we're going to have to do.
But like one of our building blocks that we've kind of used over the last number of years for our success has been discipline. And I thought our discipline was poor again at the weekend. There was a lot of very, very silly penalties conceded.
I think a couple of people were ill-disciplined.
Possibly
but I
so,
think the team were quite disciplined.
Yeah, okay, that's a better way to put it.
I thought, you see it sometimes with Darcy. He gets a very fighty head on him sometimes, and he gets a bit of a thick head on him. And he had one on against Ulster. I don't know why, but he really had his angry head on.
He had it in for Tommy Bowe anyway.
Yeah, he certainly did. And he made the mistakes, and he deserved to be punished because they were dumb mistakes. They really were. The one against Tommy Bowe was just pure. I'm going to hit this lad.
Yeah.
But then there was another one where the ref actually told him to leave it, and he
went for it. Yeah.
But the thing was that Ulster had so much possession in the first half, and they really they only got to 6-0 on the stroke of half time, even though they possibly could have been 12 or 15 points clear at that stage.
Yeah. Well, not only that, they also had the man in the bin.
Yeah.
Ulster, when they got to 9-0, they had a kind of a choice. They were either going to push on,
or try and
sit back. Now, whether they decided to sit back or whether Leinster upped the gear, which I think it's a combination of both. Certainly, when Leinster went to 9-6, I thought there was only going to be one winner.
I had that feeling too. Yeah.
Because it was the same role we'd seen a couple of times against Claremont. We've seen it a couple of times in different games. That Leinster go on that roll, they get enough points, and it's good night Irene. Not Irene Enright, but it's good night Irene.
Somebody said to me on the way out of the ground that geez, we stole that, didn't we? And I looked at him and went, no, I don't think we stole it at all. It was, I think we were very good for our win. Okay, it was a very close game, and Ulster could have won it. And I'm not saying that they didn't deserve to be in it at the end, but I think we certainly did enough to win. And like you said, we rope-a-doped them. We split them open eventually with our little Ian Madigan try.
But in the lead up to that try, I thought one of the few times that Godfrey actually put a ball in over the top, a diagonal ball, and kicked for position rather than hoofing it in the air and hoping for the contestables, as they call it now.
Well, I think there was an element of there with the contestables, that there was kind of a double-edged thought process there. First was obviously, like you were saying earlier about Craig Gilroy. He's no Gervin Dempsey in terms of positioning. And the second thing is, now I don't know, maybe it's just me thinking about these things too much, but I would say that there's kind of a little niggling voice in the back of Ulster players' heads every time the ball goes in the air, in terms of the various different incidents that have happened around Ulster with players in the air, both in their favour and against them over the last, we'll say, 6 weeks.
It's a thing generally in rugby. You tend to see people who watching Saracens and Quins the other day, a similar kind of thing happening, where guys are afraid to go in.
That is actually, because since the pain thing, it's a massive issue. I mean, I was watching Championship playoff semi-final there on Sunday morning, and even at that like everyone was focused in on challenges in the air. So maybe that was an element to it. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I'd say it might have been. There might have been a kind of a question of, turning a psychological screw in the Ulster mind. People talk about the amount of possession that Ulster had against us, and I remember back to Joe Schmidt's first game in charge of Leinster against Munster, and Joe had a couple of bad results coming into the Munster game in the Aviva.
He lost the dressing room, in fact.
He'd lost the dressing room, and we won that game. But everyone was saying, "Oh, Munster deserved to win. They had so much ball. They had loads of possession." And then over the next 5 wins that Leinster had against Munster, you saw a pattern begin to emerge that this Leinster team is quite happy to let the opposition have as much ball as they like, as long as it's slow ball. And we saw, to a certain extent, that against Ulster as well. I mean, we let them have as much ball as they want, but they kind of ran where we wanted them to as well when they got it.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's kind of that. There's an element that when Leinster are playing well, Leinster play well without the ball. That's when you see Leinster, when you know that the things are beginning to click.
Yeah, the great discipline, and even at the end of the game, they were lining up in defence. The Ulster were getting nowhere through them. I noticed a similar thing. I didn't get to watch all of the Saracens Harlequins game, but Saracens were brutal in that, and they were for the last quarter. Their rush defence is really hard up and really fast to the line anyway, but they were just relentless, and they were doing kind of what we did to Saracens in Wembley a few seasons ago, where they're just hitting, making their tackles, getting up, doing it again, fanning out across the pitch, and they're irresistible. They're you can't break them down.
They were good. Yes, very good. Yes.
Exactly.
Is that sad reflection how rugby's going?
It's the way
been banging on about it for ages. It's the defence is on top, and like it or not like it, and we
and then a coach will come along with a new system.
We said it,
and it'll change it, and then a tackle or a change in the way regulations or the rules, whatever. And rugby's constantly been it's been like that since the 1880s.
But like for a neutral watching that game, like obviously we were very involved in it, and it was a great atmosphere.
No one knew how you got a ticket.
But like for a neutral watching it on telly, would they have been enthralled by it?
If you weren't enthralled by that contest,
but because we're biased, because we're
I no, there was something visceral about that game. I mean,
I thought so. Yeah, and Munster and Glasgow the previous night as well was
it wasn't
hard game.
I mean, nobody's idea of a purist's rugby, but it was visceral. It was. That kind of physicality speaks to the soul, if you like. Yeah. And you'd see two teams of superb athletes totally committed, or 4 teams in the case of both semi-finals.
Well,
and given they're all, I mean, there's no way you can't be enthralled by it.
Some people like basketball thrown it around the place.
Quins against Leinster in 2009 quarter-final. I mean, quality, meh. But could anybody watch that game without being enthralled by it?
I don't know, because I've never watched it as a neutral. But whether you have, like, some people love, as I was saying, throwing the ball around basketball style, scoring 1 million tries, and if they don't do that, it's not. Kiwis and Aussies can be a lot like that. If they don't do that, it's not a good game. If there can't be a 6-3 game that
I think it's more Aussies. Kiwis quite like the old
bit of physicality.
the old mano a mano stuff.
It's all well and good, but you have to have the basic skills. And when you're knocking on passes or been pinged for going off your feet,
Yeah.
it takes away from it.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
And I don't think it wasn't by far and away. It wasn't a perfect performance. It was a great game to be at. It's a great game to watch, and obviously a great result for us. But I don't think that the quality of the game itself was very good, because I thought both teams made an enormous amount of mistakes.
I see. You got two things there. You got the quality of the game. Was the quality of the game great? Possibly not. You're probably right there. Was the quality of the competition?
Oh, fantastic!
So you've got two kind of things. I think, and like you say, if you're a neutral, are you going to know about those things? Are you going to go, no, God, they're very quick off their feet. That referee's blowing it at the rope. You're not really going to know, because you're not kind of that engaged. What you're going to see is an incredible competition.
But also, if you look at games in the Southern Hemisphere where there are big cricket scores, there's a lot of comedy tackling involved. There are a lot of guys not really trying.
They're very unsatisfying sometimes.
And it can go too far, because I like people throwing the ball around and scoring tries with the best of them. But it goes past a point where, like you say, is that really that impressive? Nobody tried to tackle him. A few guys slapped him on the way by, but nobody really got a hand on him. And there wasn't the visceral, as you say, the visceral kind of, I'm going to kill this guy. And isn't that the beauty of rugby, that you can have both? You can have, you can have a team of little small guys run around a team of big lumps, or you can have a team of big lumps pulverise a load of little small guys, and quite frequently both in the same game.
One little small guy came on and I think made a big difference to our match. So we'll have a quick look at the try.
Yep.
I thought Devon Toner was fabulous.
Oh
on the
yeah,
touch.
yeah. He was for me. He was certainly our man of the match. I mean, you could. I would have given man of the match to Henderson, but I think from a Leinster point of view, but there was a lot of stuff.
Notice as well how we dragged them all in, and how Ulster bunched up in defence.
Well, the thing to notice in this is how the ingredients look the same as a lot of Leinster tries over the last 5 years. You got the Darcy carrying in contact. You've got Leo Cullen taking the ball in and sucking men in, then releasing very quickly. You got a rumble by a prop, and then a bit of cleverness.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look,
something unfortunately we've been lacking a lot.
Add water, and it's a Leinster try kind of thing.
Well, there was a few elements to it. Goppert's little pass was excellent. The line, it was only a little tiny line that Madigan took, that wrong-footed Jared Payne. Now, Jared Payne's no mug. Maybe he's not the fastest guy anymore since his injury, but he's not a mug either. And you'll see it here. He's just left grasping at straws.
Yeah, he changes his line at the last minute, just before he hits the gap. Yeah.
And that kind of, you can't buy that. You really can't. And you could see Madigan was on a mission. There you go, little shimmy.
But he showed
changes the ball to the right hand, because Tony Ward isn't here to say it, so I'll say it.
But he was on a mission. He wanted to be involved in every play when he came on, and he was hungry for the ball, and that just shows that his desire is still there.
Oh, his attitude was great. His attitude was.
I mean, a lot of guys can go affect this for a game of soldiers.
Yeah. I don't want to play. I'm not playing in my position. But no, his attitude was absolutely top notch.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's I have to say that himself and Goppert, I think both
play very well together. Actually,
well, they do, but they both have the team. They're both good team men. That they want to do what's best for. I suppose most professional rugby players are. But you don't see as many prima donnas these days, but Madigan certainly looked on a mission to impress. Whether he'll get a spot in the final now is the next question.
Yeah, well, indeed, we see. But anyway, one of the guys that mightn't be playing in the final is Dricko after he got a knock to his neck. He did look a bit dazed initially when he was lying down, but then I think he looked okay when he was chatting to the doc, but he took him off.
But it should also be remembered that dazed does not equal concussed. Dazed equals dazed. Concussion is an entirely separate thing. Now, he may well have been concussed, he may well not have been concussed. All we know is that he was dazed. They're different things. The one I've been worried about is actually McFadden, because when he went down, he gave a bit of he seemed to exhibit what they call a fencing response, which is when you get a brainstem compression, which leads to concussion, your arms go up straight in front of you, and they're held there for a couple of seconds before being released, and that can repeat. If you watch it again, he seems to give that response. If you watch it just in comparison with Alex Good when he's hit by Jared Payne, he does. It's almost textbook what he does. So if you look at McFadden and I take a look at it, looked like it to me now. As I said, I am absolutely no expert in these things. Looked like a fencing response to me, which might mean that he might be more of a worry than O'Driscoll, who just like went at Sparko.
Yeah, well, we're going to run out of wingers, so I think Aslan Fanning got a broken hand. Baby Carney's out. If McFadden's out as well, we're under the cosh. Luke Fitzgerald,
he's out for the season, I think.
Yeah, they might have to rush him back against his better judgment. Anyway, that's for another.
That's
day.
for another day.
Anyway, there's a big signing was announced today. Kane Douglas coming over from the Taz.
Yeah.
You're inside man, John. You can give us some.
Finally, I'm an inside man now. Okay. Finally, we
As opposed
got
to a backdoor man.
across the line. Finally, we got
Blues parlance.
we got him across the line, and great. It's possibly the biggest weak area in the squad, with Leo retiring, and apparently Quinn Rue is going to have
mentioned that in the Irish Times
hasn't
today.
been confirmed whether he's gone or not. He didn't have a brilliant game the other day, but the guy hasn't played. He played A rugby for most of the year.
He was another one in the Dulux Magnolia range.
He was, but you could make a lot of excuses for him, which I won't go into now.
He does kind of have reasons.
Yeah, but Douglas, as I was saying today, is kind of a guy.
Just for a second, you actually have two of the best second rows playing currently in Ireland at the moment, playing in that game. So they had to outshine, like you'd possibly the starting second row pairing post World Cup.
Yeah.
And both of them were absolutely outstanding.
Yeah,
like Henderson was
that's
brilliant.
a very fair point
and,
actually in comparison.
And so if you're trying to compare, like Rue is a good player, but he hasn't had the exposure at this high level. I mean, it took Devon Toner a number of years to get to be now being established and to say, God, every game
which
he plays,
makes Henderson look even more impressive.
You've
The
got
guy is like 5 or something.
You had
It's
three-
just unbelievable.
You had three outstanding second rows on the pitch, and you're comparing them to that kind of company because Johan Muller's a great player. Will be always
He's
regarded as one
faded
of the
a lot.
He's faded a lot, but just he can play from memory better than a lot of players at the
That's
top
true.
can play, at their peak. And obviously you've got Devon Toner, who's the Irish incumbent, and really, really playing well at the moment. I mean, if there was
two
a
lovely line-out steals.
if there was a Lions tour this summer, I mean, there's no question he'd be on it, and he'd be knocking on the door himself and Paul O'Connell as the Lions pair.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussion had on that one. Let's.
Well, yeah, but his form at the moment is such that and obviously Henderson, the young charger, the bright prospect, possibly the brightest second row prospect himself, and what's the English guy's name? I want to call him Angela Lansbury, and it's not that.
I know your man, the Wasps guy,
Yeah.
Launchbury.
Yeah, the two bright young prospects in European rugby in that
He's very
position.
young.
So
And Johnny Gray, let's not
and
forget.
Johnny Gray, who was
Who we're
superb
gonna come up
tonight.
against
He
him.
was absolutely superb against
He is a great player.
Munster.
I think he's already.
He's
as
matured
good
this
as his
year.
big brother.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, although his big brother played very well actually on at the weekend. He's really matured this year. So for Quinn Rue to look not quite at that level just yet, it's kind of acceptable because he's up against the creme de la creme.
He did hold the shirt like for
Yeah.
60 minutes or whatever, because maybe Leo Cullen wouldn't have made 80, so somebody had to.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But
meanwhile back at Kane Douglas,
Great signing.
He's a great sign. He's a 14 cap Wallaby who's given up his Wallabies career to come over here, given up a shot at the World Cup. Now he could be only an injury or two away from that Wallaby team, who knows? But he's had a bit of a dip, I think, this year in form. He's fallen a bit away from the Wallaby squad, but it's kind of weird because he's a big physical guy who can scrummage on the tight head side. He's also very tall, and he has the athletic thing. He's got good hands, and he's fast. Like he's Malo Kelly fast, which is for a second row is pretty.
I hope you mean
fast.
physically and not mentally.
Anyway, he can fit in either. He can fit in either of the stereotypical locking positions, which means he can play with Downer or McCarthy. But like in his current club, he's got a guy, Will Skelton, who's 43 stone and 21 years of age, and who's the power guy, obviously. And he's also got Pod Keeter, who's plays in the back row and occasionally in the second row with them, who's another bit of an enforcer around the park. So he hasn't really been an enforcer this season, but he's capable of doing that role as well. And I think he's just going to complement. I mean, he's going to complement what we have in the second row stakes. And I think it's
provided
great
his attitude
well,
is right.
we'll see
he's
about
a
his
perfect
attitude.
signing. Yeah,
We'll see about his attitude.
one can only assume it will be because he's
But
a
he's
professional.
24,
He's a perfect
25.
signing, yeah.
You know, he's a young guy, and we could get his best years as a luck.
Like that's something that you don't see very often. Is like a guy, a current, a young guy in the early 20s. He's an international, and he's willing to try it up before the World Cup.
Yeah.
So
fair play to him.
yeah, it's a big step. But
Fair play to us.
So in the other semi-final, Munster were beaten by Glasgow 16-15.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, great for the league that Glasgow.
Yeah.
And there's rumours that they're bringing 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 fans over which would be great to see.
If they bring 2, I'll be very impressed.
It's better than 200 or
Yeah, which is normal for.
And
away
you can be
teams.
sure that no matter how many they bring, whether it's 2,000 or 4,000, they'll be absolutely eyeballs out and stocked, crazy for it, which is
I was
great.
struck by watching some of the posts from Glasgow guys and about their excitement and about coming over and all that. It was brought back to maybe 2009 for us travelling in hope to Edinburgh, and just the buzz, like, and how
and enthusiasm.
I mean, it's not like we're jaded. I mean, we still love going to, we've had such great days out, and hopefully we'll have another one in a week and a half, but we'll never have that.
It's great to be reminded we were young once.
Exactly, we'll never have that joy of our first big final again.
You never forget your first time.
Yeah. Exactly. So
it's so long for you now, though.
It's there
Remember your last time.
It's their first time. It's great to see.
John's first time it was done in the back seat of a woolly mammoth.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. So like in Glasgow, definitely the form team. Like I think they won 9 on the bounce now, and and they've been slowly growing. Like they've been in.
Be great for the league if they beat us, but I hope they don't.
Yeah, I agree. but like I think that was their third consecutive semi-final. They were beaten twice by us in the last 2. So to actually get over that line and eventually make a final, but like they're doing everything right in that club. They've got the perfect sized ground for their fan base. And
it's really generating a fan base.
And
It's generating an atmosphere.
Might not be the perfect size for long.
No, the atmosphere. Well, I think they can add another tier to one of the stands. So the atmosphere on Friday night, you could hear it coming over the television. It was very, very raw and visceral, and the way you want it to be for a knockout match like that. No, they seem to be. I mean, you were saying they're the form team. They're not only the form team. Most of their players are the form players. On top of that, they're really playing well,
and they play above their journeyman.
Status, can I use my favourite word?
What?
Gestalt. There is a gestalt there. No, their players are playing well. They made Townsend made what were considered before the match to be astonishing selection choices. Well, maybe 3 even, because obviously he left out Nico Matawalu as well, but he brought out he left out Hogg and he left out the out half with no neck, Weir.
Donkey Weir.
But your man Finn Russell played an absolute stormer. I thought
such a young guy.
I thought Murchie was very good. Now he wasn't particularly special, but I thought he was very good. But the one guy that's really worrying me is actually Maitland. Maitland has really hit form. I mean, there was a lot of talk last year. Was he fit enough to have form to go into the lines? Unfortunately for him, probably not at the time. But you see him now, and he's shown that why he would be a lines winger.
He's got class.
Yeah, he really has.
But you've also got Johnny Gray.
Yeah.
You know what year Johnny Gray was born in?
I don't depress me.
1994.
Jesus, I'd already started work.
I'm not going to tell you what I was doing in 1994, but
pulling the woolly mammoth hairs out of your. Well, it's not just that. I mean, you look at what happened. If you had said who's going into that match, who's Glasgow's danger forward, you would have said Strauss. And what happens to Strauss? He's gone after 20-25 minutes. Did they miss him?
Big Naka comes on.
Yeah, they didn't miss him one iota,
He's great though. I mean, he's a lovely player to watch. The Nakarawa.
Nakarawa, yeah.
The way he can jump around with the ball in one hand, and he play in the second row, play at 8. He was brilliant at 8 the other night. He was really, really good, and he combines well with his little Fijian mate.
Jason's going to say his name.
No, I'm not.
Madawalu, isn't that even easier than Yana Yanatawa? But anyway, we won't go there.
Or Tagi Kakabau.
Number 9.
And I must say, he's got an absolutely amazing haircut. His most recent haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you, it was done using geometry. That
poor Al Munster went out in a tight game, which if they'd have won it, you wouldn't have said. They didn't. It was a very tight game, and either side could have won. And in fairness, Rob Penny was giving out yards about having no TMO or no camera down the far end of the behind the goal view, and that could well have given that try for Zebo. Zebo seemed to think he had it.
Tony Ward, writing in the today, was less than impressed with Penny's attitude actually to that. He's saying, yeah, if there was a camera there, you might have got Zebo's, but you might not have got Varley's, so keep your mouth shut. It was surprising actually. After the game, there was kind of a post mortem on the Penny era, as it were, and the papers had suddenly realised that they were going from side to side, not doing much with it. Which was news to only anyone who hadn't watched Munster rugby for the last 2 years. Because I mean, what had changed, and why was it? Why is this suddenly news?
Yeah, well, isn't that a classic? Penny came over from Canterbury trying to get guys to play a style that they weren't accustomed to. Finally, they found a level that it was kind of working for them, but they never had a centre pairing that was going to be able to. They didn't have second rows that could handle. I mean, poor Al Dunners used to be given out to if he touched the ball at one stage of his career, famously. So they were never going to be able to play that style with a big second row out in the wing and all of that stuff going on. So, maybe they're going to revert to type a bit next year. And no harm.
They've picked an all-Irish backroom staff. They've brought
That's
in...
right, yeah.
They brought back... Mick O'Driscoll's come back in as some technical advisor. They've brought in, I think, Walsh from Corkon. Jerry Flannery's in as scrum coach.
Is he scrum coach or strength and conditioning? I didn't really
say
much.
Scrum,
yeah. Okay.
I know he did a master's in strength and conditioning.
I'm sure they'll be
in Arsenal.
I'm sure they're very cheap.
Well, you wouldn't know,
Might
but
also be very good.
They might be, but I mean, it's a huge risk to take.
Well,
the entire coaching staff is completely untried at professional rugby.
Well, they took a big risk going with Penny because they brought in a guy who came with a pedigree of playing with Canterbury. And he tried to impose that style, as you said, John, and it didn't seem to work. And it really hasn't worked in 2 years.
But what's the first thing you do
when
you get a group of players and want to set up a game plan? You look at what you've got and you design the game plan based on that. You don't go, this is the best way I think to play rugby. Now, what do we do? Oh, you guys aren't very good at that. Well, look, we're doing it anyway.
Well, you also need to have your players. You also need to have your players actually, buy into it. And I don't think that the Munster players ever bought into either what Tony McGowan was trying to do or what Rob Penny was trying to do, because I think that there was voices either from senior players or from former senior players
involved in the squad
that may have been involved in the squad that had an idea about how Munster rugby should be played, and it doesn't matter if the team's capable of playing that way or not.
Well, yeah, there's an element of truth in that, but also I think they've probably learned a lot from the Penny era that'll stand to them when they they're
going to need it, because when it boils down to it, I mean,
style.
if now I actually think Foley's clever enough not to do this, but if they go back to traditional Munster rugby, they'll get hockeyed because they don't have the pack that they used to have. Munster rugby, despite all the old underdog and Joshua were only dockers and doctors, turned up, so we brought our boots kind of thing.
They had the pack from hell.
They had the pack from hell. They had one of the most formidable packs that European rugby has ever seen. They don't have anymore. They have maybe the third, maybe the fourth best pack in Ireland. I mean, the Munster pack, and I include Leinster A in that. The Munster pack is nothing to write home about. It's got one or two good players. It's got Paul O'Connell and it's got...
I think you might be exaggerating to make your point.
No, it's got Paul O'Connell and it's got Peter O'Mahony, and beyond that, I wouldn't have him in Leinster A.
Okay.
It's harsh.
Harsh, Dave.
Well, I mean, would you? I mean, BJ Botha, I mean, he's fine on pension day. I mean, you've got Varley,
He's probably a few years younger than Mike Ross.
Who not only couldn't hit a cow's arse with a banjo, if he went to pick up the banjo, would miss. I mean, you've got Dave Foley, who's, from what I can see, his only benefit is that he has the surname Foley. You've got CJ Stander, and you've got James Collin, and they brought in Robin Copeland, a mediocre player with a mediocre club last year. Yeah.
Well, he was one of the best players for Cardiff last year.
It's a bit like being the world's tallest dwarf.
Okay, I think you're being a little bit harsh.
I don't think that I am. I think that, yeah, they have
They're not
some
world beaters, but
no, and the thing about to play that game that they used to play, you do kind of have to be world beaters because it's all you've got. It's all you're going to do. Now, I don't think the Munster game was as simplistic as people like to think it was. Certainly not.
The rules suited it.
Certainly not towards the tail end of Kidney's first stint and during the Alan Gaffney era. Munster were actually quite an expansive team. They had a particular way of playing, yes, and it was quite by rote. But it wasn't expansive. It was a more expansive system than people like to think it was.
Scored quite a few running rugby tries as well.
I always remember, like, if you like, you could almost call this the classic Munster move. Generally in their own 22 or slightly outside it. Quick ball off the top. O'Gara skipped pass to Mikey Mullins, and O'Gara's pass was at that stage was so whippy he could put Mikey Mullins outside his man, and that would create a break, and they'd be gone. Like, and then you'd have John Kelly and those guys following up, and that was, if you like, a classic Munster move. That kind of stopped when O'Gara's kind of pass faded as the years, and they became more forward oriented as the game changed.
Yeah,
but they don't have the pack to play that game anymore.
Well, the game suited them because you were allowed pass back into your 22. We had Stringer to go back to Rog in the 22, who could kick it quite away, and he knew that when he hit touch, he could kick directly for touch.
They could challenge it.
When he had John Hayes to throw someone up in the air all on his own, with timing that.
We spoke about Ulster having psychologically.
Ulster could feasibly put 3 jumpers in the air back in those days, if you recall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we talk about Ulster being psychologically damaged goods with their amount of defeats in big knockout games. But Munster are starting to get into that territory as well. Like they've since 2009 they've lost 4 Heineken Cup semi-finals.
Yeah, it turns out they're not better when they're bitter.
And they've lost 3 Pro 12 semi-finals out of the 4 that they've been in.
They're just bitter.
Yeah, well, what's the Ulster statistic is now 10 knockout games and they won 3. Which is grim reading.
That Ulster team, as it is currently formulated, has now officially jumped the shark. There's going to be a new team next year, and there has to be, because
unfortunately we're all in the position where it's close to the World Cup and there aren't any big signings coming through.
They'll have enough players, and there'll also be young guys coming through. I mean, there's going to be. I mean, Stuart Oling, I think, is going to make a serious play for that team. I think
plenty of backs coming through, but like, who's going to replace Afoa? Who's going to replace Tom Court?
And you saw like that those props aren't up to that level of that semi-final.
I think they're okay in the back 5 of the pack. I think that the problem is the props. Well, Declan Fitzpatrick's back next year, not on Afoa's level, but he's not bad. I mean, he's
if he can stay fit,
yeah. But they do have that problem. I mean, there is an element of rebound. They have to do what Claremont didn't have the balls to do.
That's something actually. Sorry for jumping back and forward, but that's something that in the selection with Anscombe as well, that he played Dyack for the full 80 minutes and him only just back, and he had Wilson and Henry combining at 7 and 8, and neither of them are like, they're pretty glacial in their. You can play a slow 7. 7 is the least. Is the one you want most speed in, but you can't play a slow 7 and a slow 8.
But
then they brought Sean Dougal on, I think, at the end,
Sean
Doyle on at the end to replace Henry. I mean, the fittest bloody guy there. You would have thought.
I thought they missed Nick Williams so much.
Totally,
no ball carrier.
He was one of their
line
breakers. Yeah.
Although I do think that actually, one thing Mark Anscombe did get right, and I'm going to disagree with you in terms of the Williams thing, is playing Wilson at the back of the scrum. Can you imagine Williams? The one area that he is weak in is his work as his orthodox number 8 work.
Cleaning up the
trying to get that ball out the back of that scrum.
On a retreat.
Wilson did really well a couple of times.
Yeah, he has that over Williams.
Williams would have had serious problems. I mean, it could have actually swung the whole game Leinster's way without even having to worry about 6-9, 9-6 tries, whatever. If Williams had been there trying to tidy up that ball, that could have been a disaster for them.
Well, he would have burst a few gain lines too, but on the other hand, you'd have to think Leinster have him fairly well figured out at this stage.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so you alluded to Leinster A earlier on, Dave. We play in another final at the weekend, playing Leeds, who were beaten by London Welsh.
The new not-nots. They're not from London, they're not Welsh. No, that's not true, actually. They've quite a few.
But so they went out rather spectacularly at the weekend, conceding a try in the last few minutes,
which makes them a dangerous wounded beast for us.
Well, you just got to presume like it's the last game of the season. They've nothing else to play for. Why not bring your first first 15 over.
I watched that game. It was actually a very entertaining game as well. And Leeds look like a bloody good side. I mean, they've a lot of strong, physical, hard runners. Their coach actually is someone who'd be familiar to rugby league fans from the late 90s, early 90s, James Lowe, the former Bradford Bulls hooker, who and indeed Ireland rugby league hooker, who is a very, very good player. He's coaching them now, and you can see it in the lines they run. They're as hard as nails, and their defensive line is just rock solid.
I think they have a big link up actually with the rugby league club.
Well, they do with the Leeds.
Yeah.
It used to be more
The
formal
Rhinos,
than
yeah.
it is. It's not quite as, because they went off towards the Leeds Carnegie University. It used to be a formal tie up, and now it's just like a fraternal relations, as it were.
Yeah, well, they surprised me when they beat Bristol in the semi-final. I thought Bristol were going to hockey them because Bristol were at home, and Bristol have spent a fortune on players trying to get up into the Premiership. But like, if you look at it this way, Leeds are a team that are a kick in the rocks away from getting into the Premiership.
Bristol are in the final.
The final of the B&I.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
They beat Bristol in Bristol.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you meant sorry. Yeah,
semi-final
in the
B&I.
yeah, sorry. Yeah,
But,
sorry.
Leeds are a team who are a kick in the Horlicks away from being in the Premiership. You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, look at what happened with Exeter. We played them in the B&I, and a few years later, they nearly bloody beat us in the Heineken Cup in the RDS. They were a kick away from drawing that game in the last minute. So, you know, while our A team is pretty good and they've been the best team in the competition and scored 27 out of 30 points, which is 2 more than any other team in the pool stages, and you know, we ran away with the semi-final. We had a hard fight with the quarter-final. We had a hard fight in the semi-final, but these guys could well come over and give us a few slaps. You know?
They're serious players. I mean, this is a very, very tough. It's going to be a very, very tough game.
Yeah, and
The question is, of course, because not only for us but for them as well, it's their second tier competition as well.
of course. I mean, this is how we. Well, I would say how we won last year, but one of the big reasons we won last year was because Newcastle were still in the playoffs, and they played. They rested quite a few guys, including Goppert. I seem to remember they didn't play him in the final.
And Jordy Murphy played for us.
And Jordy Murphy
We'll talk about the Irish tour now shortly.
Who's now an Ireland international.
So I think it's. I'm actually really looking forward to it because I think it's going to be a genuine, hard-fought final, which is always something to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking forward.
I
to
think it could be a pretty handy crowd as well in Donnybrook.
Yeah, hopefully a couple of thousand.
Well,
you
no
never
Heineken
know.
Cup to go to this year.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
But anyway, I mentioned the national squad was announced. 10 Leinster guys in it, and only 3 backs for once. You know, like normally we've been the bulk supplier, especially in the backs. There was only 3. Good few lads have been rested. O'Brien and Darcy, Healy,
And himself.
Conan, and of course Bod.
O'Driscoll is retired. So, you know, like if you look back to the classic Ireland team of the mid-noughties, and you know, which was basically Leinster in the backs and Munster in the forwards, with the odd invader thrown in. I mean, everybody could name that back line, you know, starting with Darcy, O'Driscoll, Hickey, Shaggy and Gerv at the back. Like it was the default setting for an Ireland and a Leinster team for so long. But like now, Darcy, as you say, is rested. O'Driscoll's gone, Shaggy's gone, Hickey's gone, long gone, Dempsey's long gone. You've got Rob Kearney, who's still in there, and you know, we're going to have to get used to not having the back line because it's now Ulster that are producing the backs. And in an attempt to get a replacement for Dricko, we've got Henshaw. We can't have Payne because he doesn't qualify until the autumn internationals, but we've got Henshaw getting a good head start on him there, and there's Luke Marshall travelling over. Who's the third centre? There's only 3 centres going.
Cave,
Mental block. It is Cave. Yeah. You're right. Now Cave at the moment can now play 12 or 13, so they can mix it up a little bit. I reckon they're in for some hard kicking from the Argies because they're a tough team in Argentina. Have we ever beaten them in Argentina? I think we might have got a draw once.
Nope. Yeah,
we even got a draw.
No, we have. Yeah, but we've
When
never.
Dricko's dad was on it,
He didn't get capped.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be hard, but I think that the way to beat Argentina is just to pin them back in the corners.
Well, we'll see what Joe Schmidt thinks the way to do it is, or
whether
we're going there to win.
He does know a smidge more than me.
He does a little bit, yeah.
Anyway, boys, thanks a million, and thanks a million for watching. Cheers.